Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. This week, CEO, founder, veteran, and former pilot. We were talking about that. Some of those hairy flights that he's been on in the past, back in the glory days, right? Greg Coleman, CEO and founder of SworeKit. Greg, man, great to have you on the show today.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Greg, I just jump right into things. And this is something I usually throw at the end, but for some reason for you, I wanted to throw it at the beginning because just to challenge it. What's one thing that you pull from your military career that's helped make you successful with SworeKit, getting it up and off the ground?
I say perspective. I think perspective is probably like the thing that I take away. Because it helps just really keep you grounded. It helps you realize that, what feels like like a bad day, it's just a bad day. And you're going to have another, or as we used to say back in my flying career, new day, new jet. It's like you get to start over again, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, especially as an entrepreneur, you go through the highs and lows, right? And what you see is a lot of people will end up where the highs are really high and then the lows are really low. And then they're kind of got this emotional gyration going on back and forth, right? Where I think one thing that the military taught me was to just be even and to be measured, and kind of not let the highs get too high because there's going to be a low that's going to follow. And don't let the lows get too low because it's all tentative, right? So as long as everybody lives, and as long as everybody's safe and healthy and gets home in one piece, then we'll live to fight another day. And the good news is, when you're in a tech startup, the likelihood of being in mortal danger is goes away, right? At least from stuff related to the business. Life happens, but the stakes are different, right? And so with that, it's easier to take the punches that are going to come your way.
Yeah, that's we used to say that all the time because when my first couple of jobs, I worked with a bunch of SF guys, and we'd throw up our hands and say, "Hell, at least nobody's shooting at us right now." I mean,
that's right.
you got to have that perspective. That's so true. Thanks for that. Go ahead, Camden.
Yeah, Greg. I'm curious. You're talking about getting the perspective from your time as a pilot. One of the things that came to mind immediately was I've seen different podcast interviews with people who've been to space and astronauts, and they talk about the perspective you get from just being up above the planet like that. Is that something that you get at all? I know you're not quite as high up there, but is that something that you get from being a pilot, of just kind of this greater perspective of we're all such small things in the big world?
That's actually an awesome question. I really like that. I've never had to answer that one directly, but I actually like that a lot. So I think there are a couple facets to that. Mm-hmm. One is, now from the global perspective, no, it's we never quite fly high enough to be able to get that perspective. Although what I can say, my times flying Gulfstream 5s, that airplane will get up to 51,000 feet. And I've had it up to 50. That's as high as I could legally go. We can't go above 51 without a pressure.
It's okay if you tell us that you went higher.
Well, hey, I'm retired now, so there's nothing they can do about it. But right, but just being factual, 50 is the highest we've ever gone with, or the highest I'd ever gone with it. And you can start to make out a slight curvature in the earth, so mm-hmm. It is kind of cool to be able to see that. But I think the thing that really strikes me is just the lack of boundaries, and so I do see that, and I tell you what, I think it was that struck me the most. I had one mission, I was literally flying right over the top of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, right? And so you've got this one landmass here, but it was really interesting to kind of just realize just the differences between those two countries, right? Between their history and how those history and how that history has actually played out. And it was interesting because I could actually even see that manifest itself in the terrain. Mm-hmm. There was almost a very stark difference in foliage, heading from Haiti, which was much more sparse, into the Dominican Republic, which was much more lush, and it really almost looked like a boundary there in a line. So I think what it gave me perspective of is how the history can actually impact on this global scale, and even how different political systems can shape not just the culture and a society, but also shape the environment. And then I think the third part of that, of the perspective, was especially like going into combat missions, right? Is that we would take off from, from someplace in the, in like a safe location, like whether or not that was, back in Spain back in the days of like Kosovo and the Balkans, or in someplace like Qatar or UAE during, flying missions into the Middle East. And it was always really interesting how, like, for like one moment, you're like sitting there and you're talking to air traffic control and you're hearing all the airliners and all that kind of stuff. And then you just get to a certain point in position in time and space, and you flip that radio off, you go tactical and you turn on another radio. And now all of a sudden you're in a combat environment. And just kind of, it was always stark to me, just kind of going to literally like a switch, going from this safe space to this place where the risks are higher. The air didn't change, nothing changed around me, but it was just really very surreal kind of doing that. And then you kind of go back in, and next thing you know, you're hearing people talking about bullseyes, and you're seeing airplanes come back without weapons on that you saw earlier that had weapons. But then now you cross that line again, and now you're hearing United 375 talk to air traffic control. So that was just kind of like a stark sort of like, okay, this is kind of like freaking me out a little bit, but hey, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's something I don't think people really grasp. I mean, for me, I had some of that, coming back, and for me, it was jumping on the highway and driving my truck, and in that intense moment from the highways I'd been on in other places. But yeah, for you, that's a really interesting, especially where you started off. What you were talking about is how you see no boundaries, but then here you are with basically a plane that you can fly through, that all of a sudden, poof, the world changes the second you fly through that plane.
Yeah.
That's really just an amazing thing. And by the way, I saw that same thing in Haiti, in the Dominican Republic, but I was hanging out of a helicopter when I saw it, so it wasn't quite as high up.
You couldn't see the whole island at once.
It took me a while to figure out why is it that and that, and because I'm only at about 100 feet or so.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's really fun to talk about that, and I would, man, how those go. We could, even without the
we go all day on that one. Yeah.
What I'm curious about is why SWORKIT? Not, name. We'll talk about that later. But why this fitness app? All right, I'll be a parochial service guy and say, you were Air Force. What do you care about fitness?
Well, what I cared about was always improving, always getting better, right? So that's kind of been something that has just been kind of like there with me, and as men and women who've served, there's a certain part of you that's always aspiring to be better, right? And for us, it's always about wanting to make yourself better. But for me as a leader, I always found it rewarding to be able to help other people be the best possible versions of themselves. I really enjoyed I kind of joked that sometimes I feel like I have the heart of a teacher, and that I really enjoy helping people achieve their goals and achieve their dreams, and I've taken that away back from my time even as an upperclassman at the Air Force Academy, in my time as an instructor pilot. But even more recently, I just the rewards and joy I get out of just coaching, my daughter's sports teams, whether or not it's soccer or basketball, and just kind of like seeing these little kids just kind of come together and seeing a light bulb go on every now and then, right? Mm-hmm. That's just what I've really enjoyed. And so the idea that we have a company that really can help people be the best version of themselves, and people who may not have been able to figure out how to get there on their own. I think that's been the thing that's been really inspiring. But it's funny you say that though, because so Ryan Hanna, our chief product officer and one of my co-founders, or my co-founder, he was SWORKIT was originally his brainchild. And funny story, he actually created it to help him be able to pass the Army fitness test, because he was a reservist in the Army at the time. He was So Ryan, Ryan was a captain in the Army Reserves. He was a signals officer.
Oh, that's great. There is the true source of innovation and inventing, right?
Yes.
There's a problem, there's a need. We need to invent something to fix it and solve it. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Boy,
Yeah, so it really does have its roots in military physical fitness. It really does.
Greg, I'm curious. You said you have this passion, like always improving, always getting better. And you mentioned even thinking you might have a heart of a teacher. I love that. Where do you think that came from? Is that something that you nurtured in your time in the military, or is this something that there was a childhood experience that you could pinpoint, like, oh my gosh, that was the moment? Where does that come from for you?
Yeah, I think it's always been there. What I'll say is that I think my time in the military helped to nurture it and helped to bring it along and kind of helped me just kind of become aware of it, right? It's one thing where for me, I've always just I've had this appetite for wanting to know more, wanting to be able to better understand things, wanting to listen, how can I begin to kind of like connect dots and solve problems? And I think I picked it up from from both of my parents. In particular, I think my dad, he was or still is, an extremely intellectually curious guy. Like he always wants to try to figure things out. And I think I've kind of like I kind of innately kind of had that same sort of curiosity, and that curiosity leads me to want to kind of consume and just kind of just devour as much information as I can. As it relates to whatever topic it is I may be interesting at the time. It may be health, it may be wellness, fitness, it may be finance, it may be technology, astronomy, whatever. It's like, I kind of like, I know a very little bit about a lot of things. And I think that just kind of stems from my curiosity. But the funny thing that I've noticed is that over time, you can start to draw parallels between things that were seemingly unrelated, and you can kind of see how this, what's happening over here can kind of inform or give you a better understanding of something that's completely unrelated. I think that's probably been one of the most rewarding things about like this constant sort of like trying to like feed my mind and just feed my spirit with knowledge.
Yeah, I can really relate to that with my background, studying agricultural business, starting on some farms, going into tech projects, doing coaching rugby, connecting different sports. One of the things that's my favorite when I coach rugby, especially with the little kids, you don't have to do as much college guys, fortunately, but is this like, okay, what sport did you play? Because I can relate rugby back to that sport so you can understand it. And really be able to use those different perspectives on things. But I'm really curious because I've experienced this as an entrepreneur. That curiosity is really great, except for when you have a business that you need to be running all day and you can't be off, reading books on astronomy or economics or whatever it is. So I'm curious, how have you been able to harness that curiosity in a positive way without letting it take too much time of your schedule?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And so it enables me to go deep, right? So what'll happen is that, I will channel all that curiosity into a single topic, right? And quite frankly, for the last, 10, almost 11 years we've been doing this, I would say the great majority of that curiosity has just been channeled into helping me become a better entrepreneur, helping me become a better business person, helping me become a better leader. And so, to the exclusion of a lot of those other things, I tend to kind of pick up those other things. I may throw them in like an audio book while I'm running, or I may get that through like different podcasts that I listen to. Or I may just take a book on vacation or something like that. But kind of like when I'm in a zone and trying to like, focus and have a goal, then it's all of a lot of the knowledge I try to acquire is about making me better, in that particular domain.
What was your shift from active duty to reserve to nothing, or full-time entrepreneur? Nothing makes it really sound bad. But what were those? Because those are different seasons you had in your life. So I'm just kind of curious, how did those happen, or you deal with them?
Yeah. Well, I was like this weird kid, and that I kind of always had this idea that I wanted to end up in business, end up in entrepreneurship. I had no idea what the path was going to be to get there, but I kind of had an idea for it. Even I was even back in high school, right? And, it's funny thing is I never actually planned to stay in the military as long as I did. If you'd asked me the 15, 16, 17-year-old version of me, well, what do you want to do? Hey, yeah, so I want to go to the Air Force Academy. I want to major in electrical engineering. I want to go fly. And then I want to get out, go get my MBA, and then go into business, whatever that means, right? And I'm like that kind of like weird kid where I didn't really change my mind on that. And I kept going. And so my actual path was, so I came out and went to the academy. I did major in electrical engineering, graduated from there, went on to flight school. So then I was active duty for 9.5 years, total, including my time in flight school. But then I knew, okay, I'm ready to start to begin that transition. But I was thinking about, well, how can I kind of like make this transition a little more seamless and a little smoother? And I happened to learn about the Guard. The Guard was not something that it was heavily advertised. Although I think it's one of the best kept secrets out there, just for what it allows you to do. Like the whole like citizen soldier thing is amazing, or citizen airman in my case is amazing. And so I found an opportunity to become a full-time National Guardsman, which would enable me to start to one, I could plant some roots and not have to move every couple of years, which was going to be the trajectory. I already knew that I had 3 more moves coming within the next 5 years, if I'd stayed on active duty at the time. I was engaged. My bride to be was, from the Washington, D.C. area. And I just happened to get connected with some people in the DC National Guard, and they were doing the same type of flying I was doing. And I was a really good fit for the unit. So I interviewed, got offered a full-time gig there, and went and became an active duty regular Air Force guy into an active duty National Guard person, which again, nobody tells you about this. But being active duty in the National Guard, you have all the same pay, benefits, perks, and you get the same active duty credit that you get just from being active duty. But you guess what? You don't have to move. You're now attached to a single state, or in my case, the District of Columbia. And so I was able to plant roots, start a family. And then while I was flying, that's when I went back to school. So I went to the Wharton School of Business. They have an executive program that's every Friday and Saturday, and you go every other weekend for 2 years. And so it's still a 2-year MBA. It has all the same amount of in-class time. It's just chunked on your weekends. And that enabled me to go get my MBA. I met my business partner while I was there. We ended up starting our business, probably about a year after we graduated. Because the funny thing is, I'd actually gone back to business school to change careers. I wanted to get into finance, possibly go into private equity or venture capital. But again, we never quite know what the plan is. But while we were there in my second year, we were doing our international trip. So I'm sitting literally in Russia as a second year MBA, and we're all watching Lehman collapse on television, as we head into the 2008 financial crisis. So then it's like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe this career transition, seeing as how literally 10% of my classmates just all lost their jobs within the last couple of months. And I've now got to go compete. Okay, maybe trying to switch and go into a finance career in investment banking, maybe that's not the right fit for me at the moment. So I ended up staying put in the military. And then, Ben and I ended up starting the company together about a year later. So then the company got to a point where we had to make this decision of, okay, do we keep going with what we're doing, or do we go all in and do we lean in and go legitimately swing the bat? We got into the Techstars Startup Accelerator, and that's a full-time in-residence program. So I was faced with this situation of, okay, this is what we've been working towards and talking about. Are we actually going to go do it? Or are we going to just keep this as part-time, keep it as a hobby? And so we made the call. I mean, a lot of people thought I was crazy at the time. So at that point, I had over 18 years of active service. I was at 18 years and 2 months of total active duty time. I was literally less than 2 years away from being able to take an active duty retirement. And then I walked into my one star's general's office and said, "All right, sir, hey, listen, I got this going on. I'm going to resign my full-time position." And to his credit, he was actually awesome about it. He got it. He's like, "Hey, Greg, look, I get it. But just know, listen, this is the Guard. Obviously, you're going to continue part-time. There are opportunities for you to come in and out of full-time duty and to still get towards your full-time retirement. And listen, you've been awesome. And I think high things of you. I think there's still bright things in your future. And, but I wish you well." And so with that, I left being in the full-time military and left that protective bubble for the first time to go be a full-time entrepreneur, and have been full-time ever since. But just to kind of close the loop, I was able to kind of periodically go on and off of orders over the subsequent 7 years, and did actually get all the way to 20 full-time years with or 25 total years, 20 active years. So I actually ended up getting the active duty retirement after all. So it worked out.
That's good. And I'm sure that little tether you had back to the drills or whatever format you were following probably helped a little bit. When when I first got out, one of the things that I had was, a guy that I had served with, I worked with for the first year or so. And that for me, and then the other people around us were from similar background. So yeah, that was kind of my tether. And wasn't quite as good of a tether as the National Guard is, where you actually get to put the uniform back on.
Right.
But that's cool, man. And it sounds like, so you're, I mean, truthfully, I'll just say it, you're a rarity, because most guys, they take off the uniform and have like no clue, no identity. And your life lessons, I think, through those different seasons, I think are really a good thing for folks to know. I mean, even just doing that National Guard thing, man, that is such a great opportunity. Actually, my oldest son, Camden's brother, Braden, is in the reserves now, doing the same thing. Got out of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I kind of miss it, and then went back to the reserves just for that same sort of reason. Yeah. So, what was the biggest hurdle when you and I already forgot his name. Good thing I wrote it down. Ryan.
Yeah.
When you and Ryan said, "All right, high five, screw it, dude, we got it. Let's step out." What was the biggest hurdle when you did that?
Well, Ryan was actually so Ryan actually came later in that story, to believe it or not. There's so Ben Young was my classmate at Wharton. He and I started. So the original company, the actual corporate name is called Nexercise. And our first product, and the one that we had when I made that transition, was just the Nexercise app, which is essentially, just think a gamified fitness tracker. Think, fitness tracker meets all your social games that you had back in the early 2000s, meets Groupon, right? So by recording and logging your physical activity, you would get points, levels, and badges, and you would get you get discounts, like you get coupons, or like currency that you could use to redeem on real life rewards, right? And so so we started that. And to your point, it was just one of those things where we had these big dreams, and we had this high five moment of, okay, we can finally get there. It's like one of those things where, when I talk about this, I talk about like the entrepreneur island, right? So everybody's kind of sitting on the shore on the mainland, in full-time jobs, with the safety to pay bills. And the goal is to, hey, how can I get to that entrepreneur island, which is that place where your business is able to sustain you, right? And you're able to like exist without it. And it was all about really kind of building that bridge for both of us to be able to like get over, and then using it. And that's where like the nights and weekends and the loss of sleep and the, getting, 4 or 5 hours of sleep, giving up your weekends, giving up all your social time to focus on your business. Over time for us, that was the point, when I was able to transition out. He had gone full time just before me. And so at that point, we were both now firmly on Entrepreneur Island. And I think, and that definitely was like a high five moment. And it was like just a really happy time. And then just to kind of close the loop on how we ended up with Ryan. So Ryan, around the same time, was like I said, he was kind of creating this Sworkit app. He was just a sole developer doing this by himself. And what ended up happening is that we met him at a conference. We really liked what he was doing. And long story short, we said, hey, listen, this is actually really cool. Would you ever consider selling your company to us and coming and joining us full time? And then at that point, he said, well, I don't know, maybe make me an offer. And so we made him an offer. He said, okay, I'll take that. And then he came on. And so what we ended up doing is we basically ended up like working to all of us together to kind of like reconstruct Sworkit and into what you see now. Because the version you see right now is much different from what it was back in 2012. And so we just were able to put our know-how and our energy and our ability to monetize it and actually turn it from just like a cool little app in the store into an actual business. And what ended up happening is it started to outperform the other product that we had, to the point that we said, hey, listen, getting back to that focus question that you asked earlier, listen, we need to actually focus all of our energy here on Sworkit, and we need to start to sunset this other product so that we can focus here. And that's actually what we did in like 2015 timeframe. is we ended up just really just pivoting the efforts of the company completely towards Sorkit.
I guess speaking of things that are very different than 2012, we had a crazy last couple of years, and we like to ask different people with their businesses what the pandemic was like for them, and I think it's because different types of businesses give different insights into it. So I'd be really curious, what was the last year and a half like for Sorkit?
So the last year and a half has actually been really interesting for us. We are actually in the process of of working through another pivot, and not a full pivot, like as far as like leaving something behind. What we saw during the pandemic was one, this question of whether or not digital fitness is real or is relevant is now gone, right? Mm-hmm. And this industry probably accelerated a decade, or maybe 5 years to a decade, in the span of literally like 5 to 6 months. And so for people who didn't think that you could get a great workout at home or that you could get a great workout using a fitness app, they realized that you could. And so then it became less about this, hey, are you working out in a gym or are you working out at home? There's a concept that's running through the industry now that's called omni-channel, right? Which means that, okay, it's now an and. Right. So instead of being an at home or in the gym, it's sometimes I'm at home, sometimes I'm in the gym, sometimes I'm in a hotel, sometimes I'm on the go. Sometimes I just want to go move like some heavy iron around in the gym. Sometimes I just want to just do an awesome body weight exercise. Right. And so that was probably insight number one, is that the industry just evolved very quickly. We all saw it coming. We knew it was coming, but then COVID made everybody else see it. The other thing that happened is that we had always had this hypothesis that Sorkit would make for an awesome like corporate fitness solution, and that employers could gain benefit out of providing Sorkit to their employees. During COVID, we started getting inbound interest in companies wanting to purchase Sorkit for their teams and for their employees. And that has actually proven to be a very attractive business, and we've leaned into that heavy to the point that we went out and we were always B2C, right? But we have since now hired a full up sales team. We've got account management, so we have all of the all the requisite requirements now to go build essentially a B2B SaaS business, specifically using our corporate fitness platform as a wellness tool or employee benefit or perk that employers can use in their for their employees.
How do you see that growing over the next 5 years? This is the really interesting thing when we talk with people, is there's a big difference between the acceleration we saw last year and then what's going to be continuing in the new normal over the next 5 years. How do you see that affecting your business?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be, so we're already seeing it, and I think we're going to see that it's going to be a tremendous opportunity for our business, because things are shifting, things are changing, not and beyond just the, I guess, understanding or willingness of people to work out at home or to want to work out at home or on the go. All of a sudden, the nature of work has changed, right? And a lot of companies that were just, hey, listen, you are in this office, 40, 50, 60 hours a week. That's just how it is. They're all, a lot of them have embraced hybrid work or remote work. Some of them have been, have been drug along reluctantly, but we're getting at a place now where a lot of employees are going to have some sort of expectation for some flexibility to be able to work from home. Now, whether or not, now it's not going to be for the typical person, it's not going to be, hey, listen, I work 5 days a week from home, 2,000 miles away from the office, right? But there will likely be a lot of companies are going to have some kind of hybrid where, hey, listen, maybe on these days you're in the office, on these days you're home. But the challenge from providing wellness to your employees, that all of a sudden now that gym membership at the gym next door to the office may not be as relevant as it once was, or that money you were paying for that on-site fitness facility may not be providing the same ROI because your people are all over the place and they're not in the office, right? And so the ability to provide solutions that are going to meet them where they are and meet them where they are, and that are going to be able to like really provide what they need, not just now, but going forward. I think that's really the big change that I think we're starting to see now. And we're starting to, and now as we're talking, a lot of companies are figuring out what does return to work even look like for us, right? And I think I even saw something recently that says something like, I think the average person will actually discount $30,000 off of an offer if they're required to be in the office 5 days a week. I think that's like the actual dollar amount that's come up in a lot of recent surveys. And not to mention, the other thing that'll happen too is that a lot of people got exposed to this work from home under less than ideal circumstances because they had like kids and a lot of them had like kids in the room or in the house. So now hopefully we get all the kids back into school in the fall. People are going to really get a sense of, hey, I can actually get a whole lot done while my kids are at school, sitting from home, not having to deal with commutes and traffic, right? So I think we're just going to see even more of it, especially once we get into the fall.
Yeah.
No, I think
4-hour work week is really gonna hit on, I think, in the reality. So thank you very much. If you haven't read the book, pull it out really quick.
Oh, yeah.
Before your kids go back to school. Go ahead, Keith. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I see this really cool parallel there as we're talking about, the general trends of returning to work and the work from home hybrid models that we're probably going to be seeing for a lot of these things in the future. And then what you were talking about with SWORKit, I think there's a really interesting parallel there, because just like working out at home or working out at a gym, there's pros and cons to each one. It takes 15 minutes to drive to the gym, got to get set up there. And then once you're going, it's great. And you have people around you, you feel that energy and you want to push yourself harder, all that kind of stuff, but it takes all that extra time. Same type of thing you see with the office. It's, I could speak from my experience over the last year, because having a small company with one business partner, we would work from home or in the office. It was just which house we were going to be at. And when you're in the same room with somebody, you get a lot of benefits from working around like that, the water cooler moments, all those types of things. But gosh, when you're home alone, especially if you don't have the kids around like me, and you're able to just lock in on your work, you can also get so much out of that. So I think there's a really interesting parallel between what you're doing with SWORKit and the trends we're going to see as far as the return to the office.
Yeah, I'll say 100%. I mean, you're hitting on all the notes. It really is. And again, and it's like, I'm not an absolutist, really with just about anything, right? I find that life tends to kind of like, most things are like some shade of gray, right? And so this idea that it's going to be, well, you're only going to work out in the gym, or you're only going to work out at home, or you're only going to work in the office, or you're only going to work at home. No, listen, things change, right? And not just change from day to day, but as we're in different seasons in our lives, they change too. So like, for example, it's like, listen, when I was, when I was a young lieutenant or captain, back in the military, it's like, look, it was no big deal. And it was almost expected. You were going to go like, to the gym for, 60, maybe even 90 minutes a day, and just go hit it. And that was part of your work day, right? I mean, I can't do that now. I don't have time for that every day. And then you start to add factor in travel. And then, and then when you add in, okay, the parenting aspect of it, it's like, now you're managing your own personal energy. It's like, okay, so I'm tired when I go home. Okay, do I want to go home and go spend some quality time with my kids, or do I want to go to the gym on the way home, right? And so so there's even this emotional component to trying to prioritize fitness, and then trying to fit that in when you have these demands even outside of work, whether or not it's your family, or your community involvement, or things like that. And so the more flexibility you have, that's when you get into this, I heard this concept a long time ago, called not work-life balance, but work-life integration, right? How do we figure out how to create an environment where we can make sure that the things that are important to us are getting done, versus having to be just absolutist and just rigid and overly, dogmatic about how to do things.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I'm glad you said that's work-life balance, work-life integration. I hadn't heard that. That's great. One of the things that we always talk about on the tried and purpose side is work-life management. I mean, life is managed because there is no separation. It's all life. So that's one of the things we always talk about. That I'm curious about the integration one. I'm gonna have to study that a bit more. Now, I want to jump back to the Entrepreneur Island because I'm really curious about this. Burn the bridge.
Well, so I didn't necessarily burn the bridge. It's more like build the bridge. And so, which is something that I've actually struggled with in entrepreneurship and in a lot of the common sort of sound bites. Especially, I don't hear them as much anymore as I did when we were first starting out. You'll hear a lot of people or entrepreneurs or venture capitalists or whatever say, "Oh, hey, yeah, listen, if you're not full time in your business, then you're not committed." if you don't just quit your job and just go out and go work on it full time, then you're not serious, right? I reject that because that is an approach. Again, I kind of like, I don't really believe in absolute so much. Okay, that is an approach. But you know what? If that is your approach, then if you're a single mother, who has to take care of your children and keep a roof over your head, and that, and maybe you don't come from money, and maybe you only have, 90 days worth of resources in your bank account. I mean, how can you honestly quit your job and go focus on a business full time that may not ever generate revenue? And if it is, it's for sure not going to generate revenue within the next 90 days, right? I mean, I think people who take that position, I feel like they're kind of like not appreciating the reality of human life, and also the reality of determination too. Because the other thing I'll say too is that, for me, again, I had mortgage. My wife and I both work, but we got responsibilities. I got two young children at home, right? Not so young anymore, but at the time, we had I had literally, my youngest daughter was born 1 month after we put our first product in the Apple App Store, right? And so the idea that I was going to somehow go without income for the next, for some indeterminate amount of time was just not realistic. It was just not reasonable. Right. And so we had to be very deliberate about how do we build this bridge to get to the point where we can make sure our needs are being met by the business. Right. And so it wasn't about burning the bridge, but it was about building that bridge. And then again, all the time, the blood, sweat, and tears, the missed, in our case, even missed workouts, right? The missed workouts, the lost sleep, the lost time to like hang out with your buddies. I became a complete, uncool person because I had no idea what the latest movies or music were. Or television shows. I just didn't have time. I had to eliminate all those things from my life. But what I found is that because of that, I had to remove all the garbage and all the BS from my life. I couldn't have any distractions. So I got laser focused. And I think with that focus comes execution, right? And I think that by having these responsibilities, it can actually help your focus and not just be a hindrance. And so to all the people out there who are listening, who are like, hey, you know what? I want to start a business, but I can't quit my job full time. But everybody's telling me I got to quit. Everybody's telling me I got to like just literally quit my job. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. There are ways to do it, and it can be done.
I love that. It reminds me of I heard Mark Cuban years ago say something about if you have a plan B, then you won't be successful because you have a fallback. And I've always thought, man, that is maybe true for this many people. But for the rest of us, I've always got a plan B.
Can you imagine going into a fight without a plan B, without contingency planning?
Exactly. That's what I mean. I mean, heck, yeah. I'm going down to grab a fast food hamburger at one of the shops. I've got plan B on how long the line might be in this and what routes. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. That is not the way my brain works.
That's right.
The one thing I want to add on that, 'cause I actually had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day, of kind of doing that joke of like, oh, I'm not planning for failure. Like, I'm not going to think about that. I'm not planning for failure. I think that there's a balance there, quite honestly, where you can have this long list of contingencies, but then still have the mindset of I'm not going to need any of those. Like, I don't need any of that. This first one's still going to be successful. You can still have all of that confidence and still have your long list of contingencies in your back pocket. So I think you can have best of both worlds in that case.
Well, I want to pull on that thread a little bit more, right? So so you're, I think more instead of plan B, contingency plan, right? So it's not that you're admitting mission failure. It's just that you're admitting that there's some things that you're not going to be able to see coming, right? There's some things you're not going to be able to anticipate. And I need to think through, how can I do this? I mean, so to the point of like, so somebody who has a job, somebody who has some income, they can weather a lot more of the challenges that are going to be thrown their way, right? Because it's like, okay, listen, if you quit your job and you got one path to success and that path doesn't work, then you're done and you got to go back and get your day job. Okay, but if you've still got your needs being met, and if a bunch of your key assumptions didn't work out, okay, all right, let me adjust fire and let me come at this another angle, right? But you're still able to stay in the fight at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, kind of like, you know, and I guess this might be another thing kind of relating to the military, right? It's like there's no successful mission planner that does not plan for contingencies and does not have a plan for when things inevitably go wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you know, that doesn't mean that you're planning on failure. That just means that you're understanding that, you know what, this thing is going to be a lot harder than you think, and there are going to be things you didn't anticipate. You need to have a plan for dealing with the unexpected.
It's great. You know, this, the old adage, no plan survives the LD.
First contact with the enemy. Yep.
Right. That's right. Where will getting tongue tied here? Where will SWORKIT be, or what's your vision for 5 years from now? Well, you know, or next month or whatever. What's the vision of what y'all are going to?
Absolutely. Yeah. Our vision is to be literally like, you know, in the hands of every employer and employee and school and student possible, right? So, you know, we also have a school program, so we're making it available to schools as well to enhance their physical education curriculum. My goal is that we are in, you know, at least 50% of all U.S. public schools, and that we are in literally thousands upon thousands of employers are using SWORKIT to provide to their employees. And that employees are coming through SWORKIT, like through their companies, or maybe some are just finding it on their own. But we just want to be the leading, corporate fitness solution for employers to like really provide tools to their employees.
Oh, that's awesome. I love the fact that you're doing it with schools too. So that's really cool, because we all know how PE has been pulled out of so many schools' curriculums, unfortunately. Yeah. So that's great to hear that you're doing that. So shifting gears and wrapping it up, I want to, what we learn, and I'm going to go first because I just like to sometimes. And man, you threw out some cool things. I love the Entrepreneur Island, and I think that's, you know, the more I think about it, that's my favorite. It is, you know, because you're right. There's safety on the mainland. You know, in that job, you know that every Friday or every other Friday, the paycheck's coming in. There's safety in that. And stepping out into some unknown, uncharted island. What a great analogy that is. That can be pretty scary. And I think I'm going to put that in my pocket and maybe using that going forward for other.
Feel free.
Because that's a pretty cool thing. Oh, I'll give full credit. Hey, this guy. So, Greg, what'd you learn?
I tell you what, you know, I learned a little bit about some lessons I learned from the military that I hadn't even processed, especially kind of going back to those first questions. That actually made me think about things a little bit differently. So I appreciate you all for that gift.
Oh, great. Camden, how about you?
Well, it was in the same vein as the Entrepreneur Island. I love what you said, Greg. Of don't burn the bridge, build a bridge. And I think that's a really wise way of looking at things in the entrepreneurial journey. So I wanted to make sure we reemphasize that as well.
So Greg, SWORKIT, where can people download it? Is there anything special? Is it generally available? What do folks need to know to jump into the SWORKIT community? Absolutely.
So there are 3 easy ways to find it. You know, you can go into the Apple Apple App Store and just type SWORKIT, SWORKIT. Just think simply work it. We're also available on Google Play, and you can also go directly to our website, www.sworkit.com, and you can just sign up directly on the web without even having to go to one of the app stores.
That's awesome. And I still love the simplicity, and man, really, really cool setup. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for your time today. We really appreciate it. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our guests, Greg Coleman and SWORKIT. Thank you to our sponsors, Tribe and Purpose. Find your purpose, find your tribe. You can check out recent episodes of The Cam and Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. The Cam and Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next week.